to see you. I am Becca Hunting. I'm the Director of Research and Data Management at CareerWise New York, and I'm really excited to be moderating this panel on innovative post-secondary pathways today. We have a bunch of fabulous panelists. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, their work, their institution, a little bit about what they're working on right now, their projects. So we'll start with Holly.
Hello, I am Holly Brockwood. I am the Experiential Learning Director at the City University of New York School of Professional Studies. We are one of the newer campuses, one of the senior colleges. For people who don't know, there are 25 colleges across the 5 boroughs, and we are kind of the online workforce university. I handle all things credit for prior learning, including the politics of prior learning, the evaluations, moving things through, and our projects now are moving into evaluating training programs and making the pathways from training programs into college education.
Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Stowasser, and I am the odd person up here because I'm not from New York. I am from Charleston, South Carolina, and Trident Technical College. And in order to understand what it is that we do, Trident Technical College is a part of a statewide technical and community college system. We each have a service region, and our service region, our mission in that service region is workforce development. So we are very responsive to the needs of the employers in our region and developing pathways that lead to higher performing positions. We have been in the business of working with companies in our region to do apprenticeship for over 40 years. In 2007, our president started an office of apprenticeship, and we started working with sector partnerships in the adult space. And then this little company called Boeing came to town. And when that happened, all of our smaller manufacturers became terrified. And so one of them, who was German-based, approached us and asked us if we would do a youth program. And so we started working with all of our partners, our K-12 partners, multiple companies, to put together a program. Our Chamber of Commerce became involved, and we started the first youth apprenticeship program 10 years ago. We have just signed our 10th cohort, and we now have 20 different occupations in 14 different sector areas. So it's grown rapidly.
Great. Well, I'm sure everybody here has heard of an apprenticeship, and I'm going to ask if you've heard of an apprenticeship degree. My name is Joe Ross. I'm the president of Reach University. Our tagline is sometimes informally, we turn your job into a degree instead of the other way around. We're dedicated to advancing what we call the apprenticeship degree. The apprenticeship degree is for young people and working adults seeking to turn their job into a degree to reach their full potential. And it's also for countless communities trying to fill critical job vacancies. We're currently really focused on the teacher shortage and the teacher vacancies across the country. And the irony is there are 3 or 4 times as many people working in schools without a bachelor's degree than there are vacancies for teachers. And so our approach is, how do we help these folks turn their job into a degree? And there's 3 defining characteristics really quickly that make the apprenticeship degree distinct. One is the learners are getting a paycheck from day 1 to the day of graduation. 2, they are engaged in an academic program that's designed from the ground up to be affordable without any student debt at all. And 3, and this is the really critical part, we adopt the workplace as the learning place from day 1 to the day of graduation, and half the credit that leads to a degree comes from the job they do on the, at work each and every day. So more to say later, but that's the introduction.
Great. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Allie Margolis, Director of Career Pathways and Public Policy at New York University School of Professional Studies. And just thank you so much, Becca and CareerWise, for putting this on. Part of my work in expanding access to different education pathways, pipelines to career-connected learning that also infuses, as was mentioned, credit and not just any kind of credit, right? Credit in a critical, specific degree program where work from the job is aligning with some core courses that students would otherwise take in their degree program. I think, like to Judy's point yesterday, right? Like the work that's done on the job can actually be just as valuable and very much aligned with the work that happens in the classroom. And we really need to connect those two. So a big part of our job is building on the foundation that Here to Here laid. We actually brought over a lot of that work from Here to Here to NYU SPS. And I see some of our partners from Here to Here schools. I think we really like kept that partnership, those schools, and we brought in that network to SPS, and then also leveraged SPS School of Professional Studies is all focused on building the future of work. Our Division of Applied Undergraduate Studies provides free associate's degree programs for Pell and TAP eligible New York City students. And so we're really focused on how do we align and really work with the employer community to map out what are the occupations, what are the industries, what are the skill sets, and we heard like the transferability and ever-changing skill sets that are needed from our job market, and how do we ensure that students have opportunities to learn those skills, get exposure to those kinds of experiences at NYU during school, and also setting them up for after.
Wow. Thank you all so much. As you can all see, we have quite a diverse group of perspectives on this panel. We come from a lot of different regional economies, lots of different types of colleges, public and private, four-year colleges, two-year colleges, different modalities of colleges. You're all looking at different occupations in these pathways, but the one thing you all certainly have in common is believing that work can earn a credential, and not necessarily the other way around, and a focus on youth. I really want to ask you all a little bit more about the genesis of each of these programs. And starting with Melissa, who mentioned this sort of industry imperative and sort of forcing mechanism of industry in your region that drove the building of a lot of these programs. I want to hear more about that. I also want to hear a little bit more about why turn to high schools and a high school age population when that was the driving force.
Okay. As I said, our mission is workforce development. And so we have multiple programs. By the way, we are the third largest college in the state for undergraduate population. So there's University of South Carolina, Clemson, and then Trident. And so we serve a large population, and our region is a tri-county region, Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties. And so it's our mission to serve the needs of that group. And so we develop programs that meet the needs of the employers. And then we have advisory councils of those employers who really inform and keep our programs up to date, so that whatever the latest technology is, we are advancing that within the curricula. And we're getting rid of things that are obsolete. So they're already sitting there. They know the kind of education that we're delivering. Since the 1990s, we've also been really strategically working with all of our K-12 partners in that region. We have 4 physical school districts and 1 statewide charter school district in our tri-county region. And so we've formed partnerships with them, and fortunately for us, there's a really one region approach. And so all of those K-12 systems work together with us to develop really strong CTE programs and dual enrollment programs for students. So we already had that groundwork laid whenever we were doing adult apprenticeships, and that made sense for employers. And then Boeing scared our smaller employers. And with that, they were interested in leaning into a more German model of youth apprenticeship. And so the employer who approached us wanted to get this started, and our apprenticeship director at that point in time, Mitchell Harp, asked them if they would work with their competitors, because he knew full well you can't build a sustainable program with just one employer. It's going to collapse over time if you don't build it in a sector partnership. And so they not only agreed, they actually hosted a luncheon of their competitors. We got them all at the same table. We talked about the vision and what it could be and said, we'd really like to start this. So that CEO threw down the gauntlet. He literally said to this group, we're in, we are going to do this with or without you. Who will join us? And so that first year we started with 6, what we called our industry champions, employers who were really willing to hire 16 and 17-year-olds, put them in their manufacturing plants as industrial mechanics, and put them through our coursework at the college. So when those employers said yes, we brought everybody to the table at the very beginning, so that we sat with them every 2 weeks, same group of employers and our K-12 partners, to say, what can this look like? What educational assets do we have to put on the table from the K-12 system, from the college? How can we align that so that students can move through this program? And what are our stumbling blocks? Our stumbling block at that point was tuition, because in the state of South Carolina, dual enrollment is not funded by the state. So it is the expense of the parents and the students. And we knew that that would not allow us to have an equitable playing field for all students. So we approached our Chamber of Commerce, and they agreed to raise scholarships. And so from the get-go, we covered all of the educational costs for the students. We still do that. It got too big for the Chamber, and so now we have a lot of other resources we tap into so that there is no expense to the students, so that they are not going into debt, so that everyone is working in the same space in a true collaborative partnership to get what the industry needs and to help every student achieve those goals. So
we're going to definitely talk more about the business proposition of all of this later, because that can't be ignored in a space where resources are important and getting funding streams for these types of programs is really important. Thank you. Holly. You are at CUNY SPS. I can say the majority of our students who go on to college from the CareerWise New York program go to CUNY schools, enormously important public institution in New York City. And at SPS, you talked about this was a transfer school that was really built to build bridges instead of barriers to a college degree. Can you talk a little bit about what types of barriers you were seeing and how these pathways were reducing some of those barriers?
Certainly. I think everybody here could probably list 25 barriers for different students. I see 4 big barriers. They're kind of interconnected. One is recognition, another is access, another is time, financial constraints, and the last one is equity. And all of those are important. I go in and evaluate training programs, apprenticeship programs that are already ongoing. And then we make special pathways so that a student will know exactly how many credits they will receive coming into the school. And we know if they become a partner with us, they check a box on the application, and they are kind of fast-tracked into the school. They don't need the normal 24 credits to come in. That's all they need. So, but recognizing training programs, apprenticeship programs are very important because they've been so undervalued, and they've been so undervalued by historically academic institutions. So recognizing them for college credit brings value to the table, not only for the colleges, but I think also for businesses that have value. Access is a big issue, particularly with the programs in New York City. A lot of these training programs are with students who are first-generation college students, and I think all of us, know, even when you know about college, navigating a system is hard. Understanding the language is hard. Understanding why do they want me to write this on the application? How do I find this? So we built in pathways so that we will go in and do specific information sessions. We will go in and give them special advising so they can see, let us see where you came from your training program. You automatically get those credits before you take your first class. We'll talk to you more about CPL. And it helps in that way with the access. With the equity issue, That's important because a lot of these training programs are bringing in students who don't always look like all the quote-unquote traditional students. And lots of times the training program, someone may be in a training program, they'll start working for a year or two, and then suddenly they're coming in. They don't necessarily, they want to talk about their work. They don't have the same advising issues as someone who's 18 necessarily, has not worked and is coming into college. So recognizing the diversity of the students that are coming in, recognizing that, helping them recognize that they bring skills and they bring knowledge. They are not these empty vessels coming into school. They have value. And showing that up front is also a self-worth issue that they can hold when they are sitting in that first class and feel like, I have something of value to say. I can talk about my work experience. Hey, you don't have college credit. I come in with 15, 18 credits. That is extremely important, and that is really important, I think, getting people not only in the door, but getting them to do all the steps we put in place to get someone enrolled in their first class and then to get them retained for the second term.
Thank you. A couple of things. I think this concept of formalizing the work that young people already do is so overlooked and is so important from an equity perspective, but also, as you mentioned, from a human development perspective, that a lot of our young people have been working in one way, shape, or form and will have to work throughout college, oftentimes in multiple jobs. And what does it mean for our institutions to really take on the responsibility to formalize what it means to get credit and to kind of quickly highlight the work that CUNY and NYU have been doing with CareerWise New York, with our partnerships with them. Our cohort that just came in will be able to earn up to 12 credits in college degrees that they'll get to carry from their apprenticeships into either an associate's degree at NYU SPS or an associate's or bachelor's degree within the entire CUNY system, which is a huge feat. So thank you both for that. And thank you to Greg Mateo also, who just had a baby, and he deserves a lot of credit for that work, but he has other things going on right now. I want to kick it over to Joe, kind of on the idea of how do we actually formalize learning for credit and for a credential, formalize work as learning, in particular for credit and a credential. You built up Reach University also from the ground up, which is something that's a little different from the other panelists who are operating in an existing system. So we'd love to hear about what were the ways that you were really freed from constraints when building from the ground up versus what did you encounter that were still barriers to kind of moving this kind of work forward?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a wild ride. So today we're a nonprofit accredited university based in California, operating in Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Colorado, and California with 1,500 apprenticeship degree candidates. 3 years ago, we had really no apprenticeship degree candidates, a team of 12 people. We had a little graduate institute. That's what we had, that was trying to just beg and borrow to get graduate level folks with a bachelor's degree to become teachers, and they weren't. It's just kind of the floor is falling out in schools of education, and that institute was experiencing that. And then we had this incredible overlooked talent pool of people already in the workplace who, if we could just get them the training and the degree while they worked, they could become the teachers. And so I think we had three advantages because we were starting really with a whiteboard, right? And they come down to people, something related to money, and something related to buildings. I'll put it that way, all right? So when it comes to people, the team that was dedicated to creating a fully job-embedded apprenticeship degree was 100% dedicated to it. Like everybody, every faculty member, every person in this small team had essentially 5 commitments. We're going to create a degree that's efficient. There's going to be credit for work. It's going to feel like 1 + 1 = 1. Only in this case, your job plus your education is the same thing. It's going to be flexible because it's working adults. No one's going to have to miss work, arrange childcare, or commute anywhere for class when we have class. 3, it's going to be relevant from the get-go. We know from andragogy and pedagogy and teaching training that relevance is really important, and we were going to make algebra relevant, and we were going to make writing courses relevant. Everything was going to be embedded in what people do during the day. 4, out of 5 was a commitment to affordability. We just came to this believing no one should have to assume any student debt to become a teacher, and so we had to design it somehow that way. And 5, the end result was a professional capital outcome. Like, we wanted to know that every single one of our candidates was going to get a promotion because of what they did with us. So the team was fully committed to that, and that's harder sometimes than in a larger institution to find a team like that. The second had to do with money, and very quickly, it was a very simple thing. When the Department of Education made us eligible for Title IV, which is the federal financial aid system, they offered us 2 categories of things: debt, like student loans, and they offered you can put students into, and grants, which are not debt. And there was a moment when the team was like, oh my gosh, we can charge anything. Like, we're free. We can actually build the highest quality program, and if it costs $40,000, that's not a problem. And then we're like, wait, no, we don't want to do that. One of our early candidates actually took a loan, even though our program is $75 a month after the Pell Grant. And so we didn't understand why they took that debt. And we went back to the Department of Education, and they said the only way you can prevent people from taking student loans is to not offer them at all. So we took that off, like, the option board, and that required a lot of work, actually, to ask the Department of Education to do that. But building a program from scratch allows you to build it in a way that's from the sort of design approach, high quality and affordable from the beginning, and that was a freedom we had. And then finally, with regard to buildings, I've talked to many folks, peers at other institutions that have buildings, and they'll say, like, oh gosh, I wish we weren't being told to fill these buildings with people all the time. Like, there's just obsession with filling the dining halls and the residence halls. And I have to admit, like, we didn't have that because we decided without any buildings that our workplaces would be our buildings. And it would not be an online degree, but it would be a workplace-based degree with online classes. And so those freedoms were really important. I will name 3 important caveats and things that we had to wrestle with, which are fine. 1, we're still an accredited degree program at the undergraduate and graduate level. 120 credits. We still get site visits from other peer institutions who will come and say, what, you're doing credit for work? What the heck, right? So we have to be high quality. We take that challenge on extremely willingly. This is still higher education, and we challenge ourselves, what makes it still higher education as well as training and development? Second, I would say there's a challenge in what I might refer to as, like, we refer to it as seat time, but the Carnegie unit, which is this technical thing which says you have to have a certain ratio between class time and homework, like, we have to live we had to sort of work through that to still be recognizable to higher education and still be high quality. And I think that's a challenge as well. And I think that the third thing, which I think is a real topic for all of us, is we are committed to providing really relevant training for the workplace as it exists now. But also, our definition of quality means you're still getting the type of education that will serve you over your lifetime, that you have the critical thinking skills, the communication skills, the understanding of civics, all the things you need to be a productive adult throughout decades of life and a lifelong learner. And so that's been a challenge, too, to sort of incorporate that while we're so focused on delivering half of our degree from the work people do on the job as credit for work.
Thank you. Nally, you mentioned, you're in a very large private Research One institution, New York City at NYU, and at SPS, which has an interesting kind of DNA to it, even within the NYU network. And you mentioned kind of wanting to take what you were already seeing in the classroom and really bring it to life through some of these programs and also new partnerships. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how this work kind of came about. I won't give you all the story, but we took on work, so Here to Here, part of Here to Here, that organization, nonprofit, it was an intermediary that worked with Department of Education, schools, public schools, mainly in the Bronx, that worked with CUNY schools, that worked with philanthropy, government, policymakers. So all of those folks were coming together to figure out what does high quality work-based learning, career-connected learning actually look like, and how do you braid career-connected learning into academic pathways. So that was something that we kind of had the partnerships for there. And then when that work came over to NYU School of Professional Studies, this was a school that was led by a dean who was solely focused on ensuring that this was the school for innovation. It was the powerhouse for how you drive the workforce and the future of work. And so all of those, the industry partnerships and the way you even design class time was all there. Like I heard about, the way that all the programs there are designed is that there's virtual, there's asynchronous, there's nighttime classes. So it's built for someone who works. And it's taught, I think more specifically, the programs, particularly the apprenticeship programs that we are standing up with CareerWise, those were all very intentionally housed in a division that was focused on applied learning, that was focused on having faculty who are teaching who are also steeped in industry and in industries of high demand. So that was one area. I think DOS is also, we're focused on access and equity. And a lot of times when folks think about NYU, big price tag, right? And there's no way. And even just the admittance rate. So what DOS is focused on, again, Division of Applied Undergraduate Studies, is making sure that there are other ways to make NYU more accessible to communities where an NYU education has just traditionally not been accessible. And so we have free applied associate's degrees for Pell and TAP eligible students. TAP is the New York State-based aid. Any remaining balance, like that $75 that you referred to, right, that is getting covered through either SPS need-based aid, where we look at a student's FAFSA and see what their estimated family contribution is, which I know they're kind of changing the system on that. But we look at that number, and either through scholarships or just this pure SPS need-based aid, we cover that balance. I think what we need to do a better job of, that I heard, is tapping, figuring out where is there federal, state, more public funding streams, or as Judy alluded to yesterday, building them if they do not exist to fund this work to make it scalable. And we will never get to, nor are we trying to get to the scale of a CUNY, but we do want to give kids more opportunities to get an NYU education, being that we are housed in a city with the highest poverty rate, most segregated school district, you name it, we got it. So we want to better serve the community. And then I think the other pieces to just build on with DAWs, because again, this infrastructure, it was really there, was applied learning. So internships, apprenticeships, we're piloting an early college and career program in partnership with the Title I high school. We're building out new applied degree programs. We're figuring out what does it look like to bring workplace experience into the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, while like in the CareerWise apprenticeship case, students are being paid at the same time, and they're earning up to 12 credits, potentially more if they do concurrent learning, other avenues of prior learning, for the work that they do on the job. And they're not just random credits, they're credits that align with the academic program that they're on the job also doing. And I think that's really important. So students can come to SPS knowing, okay, I was accepted into this degree program, I'm bringing over a semester's worth of credits, and then I get to continue doing that program for free. I can also work full-time if, let's say, with the CareerWise 3-year model, right? Like after year 3, after year 2, because it's junior, right, senior year of high school, and then year 3, you're kind of in the workforce or you go to college. We want more learners to be able to do both, right? Learn and own approach that we heard yesterday. And so that's why DAWS is really set up to do that. I think what was kind of interesting though is that a lot of this was also new. Like NYU didn't have apprenticeship programs. We didn't have them for 40 years or 10 years. We didn't, we had some bridge programs. We had like all of the industry expertise. We had all of, what the key ingredients, but we had to build, it was almost like being a startup in a major university. It was super weird. It is super weird, but it's like amazing. It was hard, right? Because you're kind of navigating the bureaucracy of higher ed and the employers that you're working with, and utilizing intermediaries like CareerWise to help sort of navigate this world. I think between having the lead, and I know we'll get to a question more on the champions of this work after, but I think having the foundation that was laid that Abby mentioned, Abby Jo Siegel mentioned yesterday, who was the former CEO of Here to Here, this took years of building sort of this groundswell, this momentum to do this work, so that when Abby went to the mayor's office, when I came to SPS, when Angie became the dean, Angie Kameth, who was at CUNY before, became the dean of SPS. When we hired an associate dean of DAWS who came from the University of Maryland, built their cybersecurity program, and was focused on how do I accredit applied work, and what does it look like to do that hand in hand with employers. I think we had the right team. We still needed to build, and that was, and every day is a challenge, but it's also, it's really motivating, because we're gonna be so excited to get this cohort in of CareerWise apprentices, ideally having earned 12 credits and then getting to work and learn while getting paid and going to college for free at NYU.
We can't wait either. They can't wait. You reminded me of something. So I formerly worked at NYU. We had a wonderful dean, Christy Patton, who's now with the new president, and she used to call the type of work that each of you are doing being a speedboat amongst battleships, which I think for anyone who has ever worked in higher ed, that will resonate, and you have tried to build something. And so appreciate all of that speedboating around each of these issues. I also heard, and we continue to hear all of this, the imperative of really de-siloing this work. This work cannot be accomplished without the myriad of stakeholders that you all just mentioned in your stories, existing partners internal to universities, faculty, namely, obviously, the public sector at each level of government, schools at each level of education, CBOs, other sort of research organizations, and obviously industry. And I really want to focus now on how each of you built industry partnerships. Melissa, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but what were really the practical things that you did to build strong stakeholder buy-in, particularly between industry and faculty, to build out these programs? Melissa, we'll start with you.
Well, as I said, we started with a sector partnership for manufacturing, but what happened was it was so successful that the other industries who were desperate started coming to us. If you know anything about Charleston, South Carolina, we are a hospitality hub. And so all of the hospitality industry folks started coming and said, if you did that for them, can you do that for us? And so we said, sure. And so over the next few years, we just had one after another approaching us about, can we do this for you? Or we heard their needs and we said, would you consider this as an option? And again, we pulled the sector partnerships together. A lot of our employers are small employers, and we've discovered that sometimes they offer the very best apprenticeship programs. So we don't want to leave them out. We want to make sure that they're at the table. So Trident's in a unique position because not only are we the RTI provider for a lot of the education the students are going through, they are dually enrolled in our courses with the adults, taking the exact same courses and getting credit for that while they're employed with the employers, but we're also the intermediary. So we serve that intermediary space, pulling all the partners together as needed. So as soon as a new wave comes in of of employers who are interested, we're pulling the right folks to the table and saying, hey, how can we do this? And collectively and collaboratively, we're building that out. So that's been really exciting. That momentum has really carried us from one industry to another. Right now, it's the healthcare system that is absolutely going insane in our region. We started out with a couple of hospitals, and one of them is an HCA hospital, who were desperate for nurses. And so they decided to start a CNA pre-nursing apprenticeship program. But Medical University of South Carolina was not on board. And so my colleague had a little brochure made with the logos of the hospitals that were doing this work in it, and he went to a meeting at MUSC, and the chief nurse, before he got 2 sentences out, looked at that brochure and said, wait a second, why is our logo not on here? And then she charged them all with making it happen. Well, yesterday I was late coming to the conference because I had a meeting with MUSC, a virtual meeting that I had to take from my hotel room, because now they are leaning so far into this. They're talking about rad tech, they're talking about respiratory care, they're talking about farm tech. They are just ready, med lab, medical assistant, they're just ready to go crazy across the board because they have such a desperate need. And it's really interesting because this year, we have the 3 hospital systems. They hired 60 in our little region, 16 and 17-year-olds, and put them to work in their hospitals. And we put them through CNA and patient care technician training in the summer, and they start working in the fall at 16 years of age doing direct patient care for our families, for ourselves, if we are in need of those services. They are doing the phlebotomy. They are taking care of helping babies be born. One of them sat on a panel, and she was talking about how she had the day before been cleaning the body of a recently deceased person. And she was talking about it to this group from this chamber in Kentucky and saying, and I love it. I make a difference. So it's that kind of buy-in from employers that sort of accelerates it and just moves it to the next level. We really haven't had to sell it as much as it has sold itself because of the success of the very beginning population. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and a little peer pressure definitely goes a long way, right?
long way.
Put logos on brochures. All right, how about you, Holly?
I think we're in a little bit of a unique position because we're on the other side of people. More or less, people are coming to us saying, can you help us? Can you evaluate these training programs? How do we make these bridges? So we have grant funders coming in, connecting us to people. We will have COE Job Council connecting us to people. I think the next step that has come from that is now these training partners are saying, we're developing this program. Can you develop it with us so that we will develop a course that is aligned with their training program completely? So it makes it much easier to some extent on that evaluation process. So we're now entering a space where we're earlier in the process. But I think, frankly, because the economy is the way it is, there's such desperation for workers and trained workers that, for the most part, I think we're now kind of, those of us who are in the space are getting training programs coming in. I think we're kind of at the point of now having to educate the training programs that this is not a magic bullet for them. It's not a magic bullet that they're going to suddenly get funding for something. And the other side of that is educating them on how higher ed works, that we just can't do certain things or we have to go through certain committees, and they don't always understand that. In New York City, they don't understand that just because School of Professional Studies does something doesn't mean that every other CUNY campus can do it. My fear is going forward, as these are becoming so successful in different pockets, is I fear that this is, because of the enrollment cliff, I fear that this is becoming the new MOOC, that people at higher levels in universities who have never really been engaged in this work see this as driving enrollment, see this as driving, oh, we will suddenly get all these new students and it's going to be so easy, you just evaluate the programs and there you go, and not understanding the work it takes to keep these going, the work it takes to ease these students into college, that you can't just add them to a 3 o'clock afternoon course. And so now I'm frankly finding we're kind of having to educate higher ed that you can't look at this as some new money source. You can't look at this as a way to increase your enrollment off the enrollment cliff. And I worry sometimes that there will be people in spaces trying to do this work that won't do it well, which will be negative to the students, or won't do it with the due diligence. I think people who are in this space, my colleagues, who love this work and who are doing it, obviously not for the money, but we are passionate about this and passionate about the students. And I'm certain they would all say, we get excited every time a student starts, every time a student graduates. And so that's, I think, my fear is that we're actually doing so well now in certain ways. We've built the template of how to do it, and people think it's really easy. I would say it's kind of like we're ducks on the water, that everybody just sees us swimming along without realizing how hard we've been paddling underneath the surface.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, logical doesn't mean easy. And I think that's something people have to sometimes learn in a really hard way. And I would love to hear from those of you and from those who have already spoken a bit more about how you're navigating student supportive services in all of this, because it's also one thing to tell a student, we're going to give you credit for your work, and then still to support a student who's navigating between each of those worlds, and going to class and working and keeping up airs in both and switching and traveling, as we know well in New York City, can be a huge barrier. That's a whole different element of this work, which is where the persistence piece comes in. And we often lose sight of persistence as we are kind of building and ideating these programs. So love to hear more from Joe and Alex. I know both of you are thinking through this.
Would you hate me if I build on something that Holly said?
Build away.
Okay. No, I think everything that you mentioned, because we both work in New York City, we're working with a lot of the same partners, and actually, instead of being adversaries or enemies in this work, we're co-creating and ideating, and we've, met several times, and it's been, I think part of it has been very exciting. I think, as you kind of heard yesterday, New York City has been in an interesting position where we have a mayoral administration, we have agencies, we have Chancellor David Banks and Jade Greaves and folks who are really dedicated to how you advance, scale, fund this work. And so that has helped, but it comes with the risks that you mentioned. I think what has been kind of just powerful that I want to mention is we had a somewhat opposite challenge with some of our faculty, where they were kind of like applied learning learning on the job might dilute the quality of this degree, or might not be met at the level that we would sort of assess and evaluate work in our classrooms. And some of them were concerned about that. And so I actually had to do, I would say, maybe more mindset shifting and paradigm shifting within the faculty community and even some of our administrators. And I think we did that in a number of ways. When we saw maybe that there is a gap in the training that supervisors need to actually support apprentices in learning all of the competencies that can be credited, and to actually assess and evaluate at a level that meets our accreditation standards and that of our accrediting body, we needed to build with these people. We needed, like you heard yesterday, cross-sector collaboration to co-create the materials that are being used by the users. And so we did that. One, I got faculty to do this work with me, to actually, okay, let's figure out together what are the competencies that we should pull out that are most core, that you want to make sure no matter what, if a student was going to then successfully continue on with this associate's degree program, they could keep up with their classes. They wouldn't, miss something really big from having gotten that credit somewhere else. We also wanted to figure out if these are the projects that you're sort of using in your classroom to assess work, what could those projects also look like in the workplace so that we can support supervisors with with providing projects and doing things that are not only a huge value add to their companies, but also align with just some foundational skills in that industry, in those occupations that are needed to be successful in the classroom and in the job. So I think that was really important. And then once we did that work with faculty, the next step was tapping, an incredible intermediary like CareerWise to help us get employers to the table. And to have those employers actually dig into the competencies that we were mapping and aligning to the on-the-job work. So they gave us feedback, for like these junior coder apprenticeships, and we were looking at our information systems management associate degree program and the core courses within it. We're pulling out competencies there that can map to on-the-job, and we got employers to look at it, and not just employers, I should add, the supervisors of apprentices who have done this before or who will do this in the coming cohort, to go through, like we did working sessions, go through these competencies. What's obsolete? What is not core to your job? You don't use JavaScript, like you use, I'm not gonna pretend to know the software, but
Java.
Java again. Yeah.
HTML.
What is that? Gmail. Right. AOL. No. So we really had them dig through and look at what was there and help us, and that helps us also create degree programs that better meet industry demand. But back to, I think, like the apprenticeship piece, they are really informing what that curriculum is. And then they also looked at the projects and the assignments that faculty created or took, a stab at. And they were like, okay, this isn't going to work in the workplace, but what if we do this? And together, the business associate supervisors, and the junior coder supervisors across these different companies in the CEO Jobs Council, they looked at those projects and they worked with our faculty to figure out, like, okay, well, what are assignments that still are core to this curriculum and of value to our companies and our departments that we can kind of agree, like, okay, this sort of is of high quality, and we can actually do this in the workplace. And I should say, these are not super prescriptive co-created assignments. These are kind of like a foundation for what could be adapted, scaled up, leveled down, and done through, let's say, presentation, report, whatnot. So I just want to, sorry for going on a minute, but I did just want to like pull out, it was that cross-sector collaboration and buy-in piece for us with our faculty that like really helped kind of like get us started in launching this.
I'll quickly say, to underscore that, and you mentioned this earlier, that's why plugging into the core curriculum of a degree is so important. It's a buy-in piece too, and it's a then inherent assumption by the faculty that this is a part of the core. This isn't an elective course, not to say that one should be more or less valuable than the other, but in terms of faculty politics, it is enormously important.
And to the employers to see, oh, they're earning or working towards a degree program that will help them be better at this job. Yeah.
Joe, you're going to close us out, and then we're going to have time for probably one or two questions, but take it away.
Should I talk about persistence and candidate supports?
Yeah, sure.
I think so we refer to our learners as candidates because all of them are in schools and they're students in their schools. So they're degree candidates and they're apprentices. And I think what is really striking as I listen to everyone is when you're doing an apprenticeship as a higher education institution, the employer is the starting place and the job is the starting place, right? For everything. So I have 3 functional people aside from support services on my cabinet. The first is our chief academic officer. They're charged with ensuring that the curriculum is fully job embedded. We're getting credit for work from day one to the day of graduation. My admissions team is actually a partnerships team because it all starts first with employer partnerships and workplace partnerships. In fact, the first admissions requirement is you're working for one of our partners. We don't recruit anyone else. We only recruit through our partners. The third vertical is student affairs or candidate support. And so here's the reality. First-year college students in this country, if they're eligible for Pell, have a graduation rate with the extra time that the government gives you to do a 4-year degree. You get 6 years to finish a 4-year degree, and the graduation rate, if you get Pell, is something less than 50%. It's in the high 40s. If you're not eligible for Pell, what do you think it is if you're not eligible for Pell? Just like yell at some numbers. If you're you have access, you don't need Pell, what's the graduation rate for undergrad?
65.
82? 65? 70?
It needs to be disaggregated by race.
Well, that's true, but that is very true. And by location, 65 is the closest there, right? So it's not even even if you have access to Pell, it's 65. So this is something we're wrestling with as an internally we set an objective for our graduation rate, and we chose, even though the overwhelming majority of our folks are Pell eligible, we've got almost 70% Pell candidates, we chose the marker for non-Pell eligible people as our standard. We want at least 70%. The people who do not have access but are getting it with us should have even a better chance than folks with access. So how do we go about that? And I think I'll tell one story to close out because we do all the usual things, right? So we have what's called intrusive advising model, which some of you may be familiar with, which means every candidate has an advisor who intrudes on them when they're not showing up for class and is proactive about stressful times in the year. So we do that. We have organized our curriculum to be prescriptive. There's only one class at a time, so if somebody hits a bump in the night, there's another cohort coming right behind them, and they can jump right into it and keep going. You can't get distracted by taking the wrong courses. We do all these normal things that I think are best practices in online and workplace-based higher ed. And then I had a conversation, this was pretty recent, 3 years into this, I was talking to an employer partner, a head of HR at a school district, and he asked me a question I don't usually get. I wish I got it more often. What's the most challenging thing for you in providing a job-embedded apprenticeship degree program in the workplace? And I thought, I worry most about the first-year persistence, right? Because first-year persistence is of your starting students, how many are there the next year, right? And that's the year when we lose people, right? Sometimes I get cohorts that, in the first semester, I lose 30%. Sometimes it's 15%. Sometimes it's worse. But if they get through that, it's in the high 90s. Nobody drops out after they've gotten through the first year unless something really exogenous happens to them. So how do we get them through the first year? I said, that's my biggest problem. He says to me, great, I will help you. I will assign mentors on the site to every first-year candidate in the program. I will assign a space in the workplace where they can study, and I'm going to go to the board and give them time off on Fridays so they can do their work. And I just was taken aback because it really takes that kind of partnership. The universities here are here for it, right? We're here for it. We want to partner with the employers for all the reasons you heard. When employers are here for it too, I think that's where you get the win. And so I'll let that be my last comment.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to open up just a little Q&A. I know we went a little over. Probably have time for one question. See if we get through that. Does anyone have a question for the audience? I double as a runner.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for everything. I'm Brianna. I work at JP Morgan Chase as a program manager currently. And actually, recently, we had a parent who came to us with a concern about their student not necessarily know if they wanted them to convert full-time, because if they converted full-time, they were scared that they weren't get the benefits from FAFSA. Again, I know you mentioned the Pell Grant, things like that. It would kind of disqualify them for a lot of the different aid. And so obviously we were saying that we have like tuition benefit programs and things like that, but how do you guys kind of navigate supporting students who will kind of go into a different tax bracket once they are full-time? And then, being able to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that that's changed their overall financial situation.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but in really trying to read the fine lines of FAFSA policy on this, I believe that if the apprenticeship is counting for academic credit, you are still, you still have access to Pell.
You're touching on something that drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So we operate in rural Alabama, rural Arkansas, Louisiana, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And I grew up in this city, so I know what it's like here. Our candidates in basically the same living, they're living similar lives. If they're in the San Francisco Bay Area, they're getting $2,000 less in Pell on average than they are in rural Louisiana, because Pell doesn't care about the cost of living. And so what it takes to be living in poverty is a totally different number in different places. Pell does not care, right? And so I think the critical thing for us has been to look for other sources of funding to braid into things, whether someone's income is going up as we want it to, or because they're not eligible for Pell because of where they live in some cases. This is where it's really critical that universities are now drawing registered apprenticeship dollars, because when you braid together $3,000 or $4,000 from registered apprenticeship, some amount of funding from the state legislature, which is sometimes available, or the city, and then Pell, you start cobbling together a model, and that's actually that's a big part of the work for institutions up here, is to figure out how to cobble those dollars together.
We're in a unique perspective, or in a unique position, because we're working with students who are dually enrolled high school students going to college and going through our associate degrees. But we're also in a unique position because we work with all of our four-year partners, not just for associate in arts and science transfer, but also for 2+2 agreements with individual institutions. And what happens, we found, is in a lot of cases, the students will come through us. We guarantee the youth apprenticeship program is totally free. We've got a lot of braided funding, philanthropic dollars. We cover every single educational expense for those students, even if they are international students. And then once they've finished and they are finishing our associate degree, the state has now passed something called SC WINS, which is the South Carolina Workforce Industry Needs Scholarship, that covers all of those expenses for those students who are in critical workforce areas, which all of these are. So they finish out the associate degree, they have no debt, none whatsoever. If they want a full-time position at the company, and the company has offered it, many of them accept it because they can go on with the 2+2s and tuition reimbursement from their employers. For our CNA program I was talking about, they're doing CNA patient care technician, then they're going through pre-nursing into our nursing program. They come out as an RN, then the hospitals are paying for them to get their BSN and their MSN, and they're continuing to go right on through the universities with very, very little debt, if any. Sometimes companies are helping them. I had a young man who really wanted to be an engineer, wanted to go into Clemson's engineering program, rural school district, African-American male, single-parent household. Mother was the administrative assistant at the high school. They knew two things, and he will tell you this, that they couldn't afford the tuition at Clemson, number one, and number two, that he would likely struggle to get the SAT scores to make that first competitive cut. So he decided to do machining with us, and he did machining, went through machining and CAD with a company called Venture Aero Bearings. They were building the aero bearings to go into the planes Boeing flies. He was such a rock star that the company helped him get the scholarship. And when he transferred to Clemson into the engineering program, bought him everything for his dorm room, from the sheets to the TV, helped him with scholarship dollars. Every time he was home, he was employed on break. They put him through internships. They helped him get through his engineering program. He's an industrial engineer with a wife and a baby now. So I think there are other resources when you put them in a pipeline where you've built it with a ladder of progression for upward economic mobility.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming to the session today. I hope you all got something out of it. I definitely did. And thank you to each of our panelists for being here. Huge round of applause. Thank you.